Carter, I'm Wayne's second son. Thank you all for coming. I wish somebody had told me how tall it is now.
I tried to fix it.
How can you tell?
Hard to tell, hard to tell. I'm trying to be festive because this is a celebration of life. Do a little housekeeping here. If you need the bathroom, the closest one is out the door to the left. You see a bunch of birds, it's right by there. Bill is our keeper of the space, so if you have any problems or questions, he's going to be around. Feel free to ask him. And this is my brother Walt, and
Wayne's favorite son. Yeah.
you know, there was Pete the prototype, and then kind of hit his stride with me, and just like the Mustang, later models aren't quite the same. We're going to do kind of an open mic thing here, and just if anybody has anything they want to say about Wayne, feel free. There's no guardrails here, so it's an adult audience. You can say anything. If you don't need to get going right away, I'll start. Okay. Then, I really can't tell you about Dad without talking about my mom first. Mom died in 2003, and she had a background as a Quaker, and her feelings about it were simplicity, which is one of the hallmarks of Quakers. And she did not want to take up a piece of ground that could have been, instead of being in a cemetery, it could have been growing crops, you know, that was kind of the philosophy. And she didn't want to have a service. She didn't want to have a burial plot. And we honored those wishes, but that left us, a family, with no place to go to visit her. I'm walking away from the mic. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. And where I made a really bad mistake in this was, well, we notified Savannah was 13, she was up at camp, and my mom hadn't wanted her to stay home from camp because we knew she was going into hospice. She wanted her to have her camp experience, and I guess I was thinking along that line. So I didn't go get her, and I had underestimated the strong bond between her and my mother, and so she was left grieving alone up with a bunch of campers, you know. So I tell you that story to tell you this story. Years later, when we were shopping for colleges, we went to American University in D.C., right across from the vice president's house. And that was really an excuse for a couple government nerds to just spend a week on the mall, just walking around randomly, bumping into memorials we didn't know existed. The highlight of that trip was the Library of Congress. And it's quite a rigmarole to get your reader's card and get in there. But once we finally were in that big, glorious rotunda, and we requested Mom's book. And about 20 minutes later, they brought Sweet for Calliope. Oh, I have a couple dozen copies of this, but I came here to see this one. And I turned to Savannah and I said, this is where we go to visit Mom. And I don't think it was a conscious decision on the part of either of my parents, but basically, I guess this philosophy led them to say they didn't want to be remembered for a tombstone, but for the body of their work. And so I'll refer you to Dad's obituary, which is really an incomplete resume, because I kept going, oh yeah, and this, oh yeah, and this. He had quite a few things that he did and was involved in. And there's two basic themes there. There's figuring stuff out, engineering, and then there's service. He was a volunteer fireman, and he was the first fireman I ever met. And he worked with Buckminster Fuller, the famous futurist and visionary. And there's a couple of museums in Chicago that have displays on him. One of the projects that he made come to life and executed is a set of rowing needles, and it's on display in one of the Chicago museums. Who would have thought in a family of fine arts majors that we would have our engineer father be in the Chicago Art and Design? But there he is. So we have a place to go visit him too. I wanted to do this in the form of some short stories that might just give you some insight into my dad's character. I brought the wrong reading glasses for this. We called him Spock because he was logical, kind of emotionless. Wasn't the guy who was going to put his arm around and say, I'm really proud of you, you did a great job today. But the thing was, he kept showing up, he was always there. And being in scouting, working with him around the house on some of his engineering projects, I didn't realize that that prepared me as well for life as it did until I hit the fire academy, which is like boot camp for firefighters. And I was comfortable walking on roofs, I was comfortable being on a ladder, I was comfortable using a chainsaw, I was comfortable using a chainsaw on a ladder, I knew how to chop, I knew my knots, I had already done CPR, but all those things pale in comparison to the Porta-Power story. Porta-Power is a tool, a system of tools that my dad was instrumental in designing. He holds a bunch of patents on it. And as luck would have it, there's a Porta-Power kit on every Milwaukee fire truck. It's basically like a little mini Jaws of life. And it was designed for auto body repair, but we kind of use it to prep things for the big Jaws or forcible entry, stuff like that. So I had been around Porta-Powers my whole life. Well, it was a particularly grueling day, and somebody did the cardinal sin of dropping a smoke ejector from the 3rd floor in a drill. They're supposed to be hanging it up, and they dropped it. And it's like an industrial-sized box fan, and the cage was all crumpled up. So we're back in they have like a little mock firehouse there, and the boss, and this was the mean boss, the bad cop boss, Lieutenant Dibb. He was never going to say something nice. If you didn't say anything, you were getting away with it. So he's over there trying to straighten us out with this, not really working. So I'm the smart aleck. I walk over and say, "Sir, I'm sure you have something more important to be doing. I could take care of this for you. I'm familiar with those tools." And he gave me a very suspicious look, but then he set me loose on it. And 5 minutes later, it was usable again. And I'm like, "Yeah, thanks, Dad." That was a good day for me. So, Dad wasn't touchy-feely, but he was a real Boy Scout. And you know, we say that about someone sometimes in the negative. Such a Boy Scout. He was the guy that drove the speed limit. So he was always in front of that train of cars that were all angry at the guy in front. He's a rule follower. But he was the first to stop and pull you out of a snowy ditch. And I wanted to share a couple of excerpts from a scouting trip I was lucky enough to take with him. When I was 14, he was the leader of a contingent of Boy Scouts from our area that went to Philmont, which is the premier high adventure base in scouting. It's a ranch that was donated in, I think, Phillips Petroleum, but I think that's where Philmont comes from. It's a sprawling ranch in the Sangre de Cristi range of the Rocky Mountains. Still the most beautiful place I've ever been. And we were there for 2 weeks of hiking. So one of the first days, we're climbing up a mountain, not with ropes and stuff, but you know, hiking boots. That's pretty much what a hiker does in New Mexico. You climb up mountains. So we're going up the side of this mountain, and one kid's lagging behind, so Dad's hanging back with him. The rest of us are all scampering ahead. And this kid was just having a really bad day emotionally. Well, Dad didn't talk him out of it. He picked up his pack and started carrying both packs. And he kept going, and the kid followed along, and that was all fine with him until he could hear our voices ahead on the trail. And give me my backpack. It never lagged behind me again. And somehow intuitively Dad just knew what to do. So again, wasn't putting his arm around you saying there, but somehow he was had a leadership moment there. And it was, I think, somewhere in the middle of the trip, we climbed to the top of Comanche Peak, which is one of the taller mountains there, and we got up there at dusk, made camp, and in the morning, Sunday morning, the sun came out in this just spectacular, the whole top of this mountain was covered with white quartz, just sparkling. Now in the Scout law, it says trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent.
Wow.
And my dad, not being a religious man, that was kind of his code. And I think he held up to all of those. But aside from doing some flag ceremonies, I don't think he ever set foot in a church. And I think on that morning, he just realized this is my chance to check mark the reverend box. So like any good leader, if you're out of your depth, you delegate. And Dave O'Connell, one of our other scouts from my troop, was there, and he's a Catholic family, so he leaned on David, and David said, all right, he knew a couple prayers and did a little short, sweet here we go, and there we go. Best service I ever went. But it was just gorgeous, and that was my dad's touchstone with reverence. You know, the outdoors was his cathedral, though. So then we went a couple days later. We go into a staffed camp where the theme of this thing was lumberjacking, and they're in the process of putting up a new pole to demonstrate how those guys climb with the spikes on their feet and the belt. So picture an oversized telephone pole, and the hole's all dug, and they got the pole there in the right place, but they can't figure out how to do that upending thing. They're messing around with it, and Dad, of course, is, and you would do it this way. You would put up a fulcrum and create, you know. So like, you know how to do it? We walked over and said, our scoutmaster's an engineer, he can do this. They're like, all right. So the next 15, 20 minutes, Dad's out there lashing things up and calling, you know, I need a pole this long and this wide, and this long and this wide. He was a general on a battlefield of engineering. And boop, pole went up in the hole. So I think that was one of the best days of his life. that was a crossover between scouting and engineering. So I'm the second of three sons. We're separated by 8 years.
Sit down.
Never told you to stand up. And so Pete went off and became an engineer. Walt became a pilot. These are all things Dad understood, but being the second son, I had to go sideways and be more into my mother's interests. So I was into theater and writing and rock and roll. Dad was pretty baffled by the rock and roll part. He didn't really want the FM radio in his car because that cost more money. Why would I do that? If he put anything on, it was easy listening. It turned out he's a pretty good roadie. Because he didn't understand, but he was always there for me. So I needed a keyboard stand. He made one. I still use it today. I have about 10 of them, but that's still in the mix. Speaker cabinet. I told him I wanted to have an amp rack I could put my amp on and tilt it. Well, he made something I've never seen made commercially with a sling, and you could get absolutely any angle you wanted. I still have like 4 of them. So he was there for me with stuff like that. And one day, I'm playing Mozart on the piano, and all of a sudden Dad's in the room listening. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, maybe he's never done this before, maybe he likes it. And I'm waiting for a little hint of praise at the end, so I finish, and he says, when you're ready to do something productive, rotate the tires, change the oil, and mow the lawn. And I wasn't shocked, I wasn't crushed, that's just who my dad was, you know, but I guess that leads to the fact that once he's in a senior living facility, there's always a piano around. So I'd always go tinkle on it, and then I'd play it. I'm just gonna let that go. And I think it was when he saw the reaction other people had, that they're kind of, you know, dancing in their chairs. You had them dancing in their chairs. He began to see the value of this. And then he came to like it too. And he had a few songs that he liked when I played. My mom used to say that cancer gives you a chance to say goodbye, which is true. And, you know, it did in her case. But, it sounds like a joke and bad taste, but Alzheimer's gives you a chance to say goodbye again and again and again. And so I was actually hearing him say that he was proud of me and that he liked my playing. So people thought it was great. I was visiting him every day. I'm just there for my dopamine hit. So I was on a run one time, and I had a cardiac patient, and this fellow, he was stable, waiting for the ambulance. We're talking. He says, so, you know, I was dead on the table for 20 minutes, and they brought me back. Hi, come on in. We got some seats right up here for you. So anyway, I think this patient who had been brought back to life on the surgical table. And I said, I gotta ask you, you hear all these stories about people seeing, having these near-death experiences and seeing a tunnel with Jesus at the end, or the dead relatives, or that dog they used to have. And, everybody's story is a little different. And if you're a different faith, maybe you see a different icon there. So I said, anything like that happen to you? And he said, well, for me, I was standing in the greenest grass, and there was a white picket fence, and it just went off forever. There was a cool breeze at the back of my head, and it felt peaceful. And I thought, well, that's the coolest story I've ever heard. So, because of his dementia, I wanted to make sure I was clear with Dad about his end-of-life plans. So I'd ask him again and again. Every couple months we'd go over it. And he wanted to do like Mom, no service, all that sort of thing. And so I asked him one day, I said, what do you think happens when you die? And he says, well, that's it, lights out. Which is exactly what you'd think an engineer, linear thinking guy. We didn't have the word on the spectrum or spectrumy to use, but I didn't understand him, the Spock part of him, much better than understanding that. I think he was a little spectrumy. They said, that's it, lights out. So I was with him at the time that he passed, and afterward I leaned over and I said, you told me that you thought it was just lights out and that's it. Bet you were wrong. So I picture him on green grass, or maybe for him it's a wooded path in the woods. He's got his hiking boots back on. His pockets are full of the following items. He's got a pocket knife in there. He's got a flashlight. He's got a tape measure. Probably has a small vice grips. Maybe a tube of super glue. And his pocket protector, he's got too many pens and pencils, and then he's got that little metal rule, 6-inch rule, that he uses to do everything with. And the last years were hard for him. Confusion, frustration, and all the indignities of getting old, which I teased him about. I said, this was your reward for living a clean life. But he's out of his wheelchair for this Christmas, and he's back on the trail. So happy trails, Dad. Give our love to Mom. See you again when I'm standing on green grass. That's it. Good.
I had 32 stories too, but now there's only time for one.
Told you I wanted to go last.
Excuse me. Been thinking a lot the last couple of days about if I had to sum up Dad in one story, what would that be? Because we should try and do that at events like this. The last 2 days I've been working on how to tell a story about Dad in the middle of the night, in the middle of the woods, in the middle of Canada, kicking a bear to wrestle back a food bag while he was buck naked.
The bear?
And Dad.
Okay.
And then, because now that he's passed, we can finally tell his story. And then, after 2 days of working on how to frame that, somebody pointed out there's still one living witness. There's somebody out there who's still in the witness protection program on this bear, so the bear story is going to have to wait a little longer. However, if anybody really wants to know, you can follow me, like, subscribe, members only, give you the content after. The alternate story, if I had to sum up Dad's character in one brief anecdote, he spent a lifetime in scouting. We all grew up in scouting. That really was our religion in many ways, scouting and science. And at the scout camp that we made a pilgrimage to every summer, they had all the usual fixed trading post, archery range, boating, etc. Well, the coolest place to go was the rifle range. Now, you know an awful lot about Dad from everything you've read in the paper and seen on the tables. The one thing that maybe only this guy knows about Dad is that he was a great shot. For all of his engineering decorum and demeanor, he was a fantastic shot with a rifle. And invariably, every time you took scouts to camp, there would be one or two that got terribly homesick, usually the younger boys that had never been away from home before and so forth. The older boys would go do their stuff, and you'd have one or two left behind. Dad would invariably find these guys, these kids, and offer to take them to the rifle range, which was a very big deal because that was the only thing in camp you needed money for. You needed a quarter to buy 5 shells. I guess the other place you needed money was the trading post if you wanted to buy ice cream. You would take them down there and say, we'll shoot for ice cream, and whoever loses has to buy. And this is a standard Boy Scout 50-foot range, and you know where this is going. So you've got a bunch of mattresses on a platform, you've got a bunch of paper targets, and you've got 2 kids, one kid who's never held a rifle before in his life, and then there's Dad. And they would start shooting, and of course the kids are going this way and that way and everywhere else. You're not supposed to shoot across lanes, but Dad would always come over to the other side, put one right in the black. And then come over here, put one right in the black, and make sure that every time he did this gag, when they retrieved the targets and brought them back, the kids would just think, I got 2 bullseyes. Wow. And of course, Dad would finish off his by putting 4 in the white and went, darn it, I missed again. I guess I gotta buy the ice cream. So they go from there down to the trading post, they'd get their ice cream. By the time they made it back to camp that evening, not only were these kids just the talk of the town because they'd gotten to go shoot the rifles, they appeared to be crack shots. And suddenly they're running around all the older kids saying, look, I got bullseyes, I got 10s, I beat the scoutmaster. No more homesickness. I saw him run that gag every year we went to Long Lake for the whole time I was in Scouts. It was a fantastic trick, and it always worked. So if you had to learn about Wayne's character in one story, that would be the one I'd leave with you. If you want to find out about the bear, I'll be signing up people in the chapter after. And honestly, I'd like to hear what you guys think. Is there anybody like to come up and share a story or thoughts?
Well,
Danny, you want
maybe
to?
not. What?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you all for coming.
I'm gonna trade seats with you. It was a little short, but not bad.
I'm Susie, and I'm going to start with a brief passage from the Talmud. In a harbor, 2 ships sailed, one setting forth on a voyage, the other coming home to port. Everyone cheered the ship going out, but the ship sailing in was scarcely noticed. Everyone cheered the ship, was scarcely noticed. To this, a wise man said, do not rejoice over the ship setting out to sea, for you cannot know what storms it may encounter. Rather, rejoice over the ship that has safely reached port and brings its passengers home in peace. Rejoice for those who have completed a long journey, for there is no greater boon than to leave this world with the imperishable crown of a good name. Wayne Hunnicutt completed a very long journey, 97 years, and wore the crown of many a good name. Son, brother, husband, father, grandfather, scoutmaster, volunteer, school board member, engineer, apple grower, gardener, pie maker, model plane enthusiast, tinker, fixer, gadget man, and father-in-law. I lucked out with my in-laws. Ellen and Wayne were very different from the family I grew up in, but what they had in abundance was presence and attention. My time as Wayne's daughter-in-law spanned 40 years, 4 of them before children came along, and many after when he became grandpa. The heart of our shared life unfolded at Fairlawn, the house on Edgewood Avenue. A trio of sons, wives and girlfriends in tow, memories made. The cycle of the seasons. Campfires on Melzels Hill, wedding vows in the yard, Savannah savoring her first bowl full of berries on the front porch. Rocking baby Caleb in the maple tree swing. Humongous leaf piles perfect for jumping, hitching rides on Wayne's riding mower, which you can catch a glimpse of there. Hide and seek under the pine tree boughs, lemonade and iced tea after canoeing down the Fox River. Frolicking with Sam, the black lab. Playful tugs of war, whizzing winter snowballs. Lounging in the living room, crackling fires in the hearth, jigsaw puzzles, TV shows, try your hand at Bill Bouquet. Not doing much of anything at all except being together. My relationship with Wayne on paper would never have been obvious or easy connection. Wayne, the father of boys, man's man, logical, at times a bristly bloke, a bit stoic. I came along, passionate, artsy, full of ideas, and not especially fluent in an engineer's language. But Wayne had a way of meeting people where they were, without fanfare, without commentary. We connected with our hands. During my furniture phase, decoupage and all, Wayne helped me build benches and stools, random objects to art. We spent hours measuring, building, sawing, gluing, sanding. He would explain how something worked carefully, thoroughly, while my eyes sometimes glazed over. He never rushed, he stayed. He was attentive. That was Wayne's way of loving, side by side, task by task. We also connected in nature with a shared love of the land around the Hunnicutt homestead. Logging annual bird sightings, those 2 apple trees producing the perfect crunch for a just-picked Cortland. In the summer, we ate straight from the garden, fingers stained red with raspberry picking, ladybugs clinging to string beans, ripe pepper plants, grapes and gooseberries, soon to be jam. We whittled sticks, whacked the leaves off the rhubarb stalks with a well-worn machete, filled the compost pit out back, and learned quietly the satisfaction of tending something over time. In the kitchen, Wayne was a masterful pie maker and from-scratch cook. We watched Wayne craft many a perfect pie crust, cutting pasta for Sunday beef and noodles, Friday fish boil, and my favorite, fried cornmeal mush on Christmas morning. When the kids came along, the circle widened. Ellen and Wayne adored their grandchildren, and we all relished that love. The way it was given so freely, so completely, so naturally. These last few years, Wayne's world grew smaller. Dementia has a way of taking people from us in pieces even while they're still here. Though when I think of Wayne now, it's not in confined spaces.
There's another image.
It's that tall drink of water with his pocket protector, old walking stick, out back, steady, capable, strong in his own quiet way. Wayne loved the outdoors. Canoes slipping into still waters. Up north at Shipman's, fishing lines cast with patience, long days in the boundary waters where you carry what you need, leave the rest behind, and move forward one careful step at a time. He understood portages, not just the physical ones, but the idea behind them. That sometimes the way forward requires lifting the load, bearing it for a while, and trusting that the water will be there again on the other side. Wayne has made his final portage now. The canoe is back in the water. The crossing is complete. After 97 years of work, family, service, tinkering, growing, fixing, and loving, he has reached safe harbor. Nothing but blue skies ahead. Adieu, Wayne. I'll catch you on the other side.
I'm Wayne's granddaughter. Savannah. My grandpa never gave the short answer to anything. Some might say long-winded, but the flip side of that coin was immense patience. Being a new mom, I think I found that perhaps to be the most important quality as a parent, and my grandpa had it in spades. There were the weekends we'd come with stacks of math homework for solving or dioramas that needed building. No matter what the task or proposition, Grandpa pulled out a piece of paper and pencil and got to work. His patience manifested on the trail as well. It's a backpacker's adage to walk slowly and carry a heavy pack. Two things Grandpa took to heart. Those who spent time in the woods with him will remember Bertha, the giant orange monstrosity of a backpack that carried a week's worth of supplies on our trips to Quantico and the Boundary Waters. I remember my stomach rumbling as we sat in the canoe, me in the bow, him in the stern, waiting for dinner to tug at his line. We planned our meals accounting for catching fish each night, and of course we did. He taught me to build a fire, to catch frogs, the best way to pick an apple from a tree, and how to hurl garden snakes over the fence. Even as a granddaughter, I think after 3 boys, he just treated me the same way. If I close my eyes, the memory of my childhood is plodding around in muddy overalls, following Grandpa through the bushes in the backyard, picking berries in summer, riding in his lap on the lawnmower. We jumped in leaf piles in fall and built snow forts in winter. And so that's how I'll remember my grandpa, waiting in his infinite patience for me to figure out a math problem, roll on a pie crust, balance the rungs of an aluminum canoe on my back, or fumble with a raspberry with my small hands as I plucked one by one and dropped them into the bucket. He never minded that more went into my mouth than in the bucket. One way or another, we always ended up with enough for pie.
Y'all come in and have a seat. We're stacking people up. We got open mic.
Hello everyone, my name is Caleb. I am Wayne's grandson. I'm realizing a lot of the stories being told have a lot of crossover with what I'm about to say, mainly the pocket protector. While I may have not been as much of an outdoorsy type as perhaps my sister or my 3 uncles or my 2 uncles and my father or Grandpa himself, I noticed that a lot of what I picked up from him was from observation and from watching and listening to very, very, very precise and long-winded explanations on every single thing. When I was young, I used to take it for granted, thinking that it was just an obstacle between myself and whatever outcome I was hoping to get, whether that was a very simple answer to a simple question, learning how to whittle a stick to a fine point, and in a lot of ironic and redundant cases, whittling a stick into a knife, which is interesting considering you're using one. But mainly, what I have taken away from all of these observations when I was young, growing into the person I am now, is that Grandpa used to wear an occasional bow tie, which I always felt was strange because he was the first person that I had seen in real life wear a bow tie. Outside of cartoons, movies, anything like that, it was astounding to me that someone would choose something that in my mind was far more complex than a simple necktie or even not wearing one at all. Now, as you can see by the pictures, it was not all the time that he used to wear one, but a memory sticks in my head of us showing up to their house one day and seeing him wearing a bow tie. And I thought this was strange because In my eyes, that is a rather eccentric bit of adornment considering the methodical man that he was. And since then, I realized that through all the conversations and explanations of how to put a piece of wood on the lathe and make a perfectly round ball and draw some seams on it to make a tiny baseball, or bringing him Pokemon cards and saying, can we carve one of these out of styrofoam? He would use his wire heat cutter thing and mold out a shape to what the end result would be, which was a very strange looking thing, but he had done everything that I had asked of him. School projects, homework, all the things of that nature. You start to realize that an aeronautical engineer from Purdue University is highly overqualified for a baking soda volcano. In hindsight, I learned to understand that the joy that he had and the happiness that he shared was in the process of explaining each and every step and the allusion to why stuff matters. You'll come to find that is a book that exists out there, Stuff Matters, look it up, it's one of his favorites. And it explains how everything from the molecules that make us up as people to the physical world around us, everything matters and everything has a purpose. And I've realized that in my current life, and everything leading up to it, all of it's comprised of steps. Steps that need explanation, warrant explanation, but sometimes we're not given it. And so, to take time to appreciate the steps and understand the value of each moment, as we can all attest to, it goes by far too fast. To notice that each moment that comprises our lives has value and to appreciate it for what it is. And perhaps lacking specificity, that's what Grandpa Wayne gave to me. And so I will make sure to do it for the rest of my life because of him. Thank you.
Need a couple preps.
Well, Linda's getting ready. It's just definitely an open mic, so if anybody has anything you want to add or say or contribute, long or short, feel free.
Hi, I'm Linda. I'm Carter's significant other and newer into the Hunnicutt family, but I think that's why I wanted to say a few words. I realized that I actually met Wayne many years ago at a robotics Lego League competition where he was volunteering as a judge and I was volunteering as a volunteer. And I recognized his name because I knew Carter back in the 80s, so I went and said hi to him and introduced myself. And it just struck me right from that moment, other than the fact that he was volunteering at whatever age that was for kids in robotics, and he just clearly loved it. He just wanted to make sure I knew that what his sons were doing, and he was so proud. He wanted to make sure I knew Carter was a firefighter, and Pete was an engineer, and Walt was a pilot, and it was just, he was beaming with pride, and that's what stuck with me. When I met him more officially many years later, I was picking him and Carter up from the airport, and I drove them to Fair Lawn, and along the way, I think I figured out how to get into Wayne's heart. I asked him what his favorite project was, and that thing that he worked on. I knew he was an engineer. My dad was an engineer, so I kind of had a little insight into the mind that he had. But he told me about the windmills, which is why I brought this, for the whole way from the airport to Fair Lawn in Vernon, Big Bend. And when he got out of the car, he told me that I was an excellent driver, which I appreciated, because I didn't think he was paying attention. He was telling us stories the whole way, and I learned a lot on that trip. So I realized that I got to know Wayne during when Alzheimer's had probably already started to set in. But the thing that always came clear is, he wanted to tell me things. And I would sit down with him and ask him about something, and he would tell me. And he was so proud of that work. And I got to know him that way. And I also wanted, like Susie, I also enjoyed his cornmeal mush, which he was very proud to make and share with us. So he, talked about every step of it, and that's just a kind of a core memory for me. Through it and watching him through the last few years, the one thing that never wavered was his love for his family. And you can see in some of the pictures where he's looking at a phone, and who he's looking at is his great-granddaughter, Iris. And he would just beam. Yeah, he would just beam. Whenever, it didn't matter what he was in, that was perfect timing. He would just brighten up when Iris was in person or on the phone, which we showed him pictures all the time. And it was clear his love of family never wavered. So that's what I wanted to share.
I am Peggy Arkin, and we met Wayne when he was in scouting. And I have nothing prepared except what I was thinking about on the way down from West Bend. So this could be short, could be very long. But as I say, when my oldest son was in scouting is when we met Wayne. And we were so impressed with the way he was leading the boys that my husband also got involved and soon became his assistant scoutmaster. We did a lot of things. My family would go up to Devil's Lake with all the boys and Wayne. We would be hiking the Root River Trail, and undoubtedly there would be a 3 or 4 year old on his shoulders about halfway through. And it was just a great time we always had with them. All my boys were in scouting with Wayne, except the very youngest one, because we had moved to Madison by then. And Steve was in 3rd grade, and school had just started. And you all know, it's not a highlights, but the magazine that we all got as kids when we were in high school, grade school. And there was an article in there about Ellen and her authoring. And he said, I know her, I've been at her house. And he was an instant celebrity in this brand new school, and nobody knew him. So there. And Wayne used to call, and he would say, bring your monkeys over here. We've got apples high up in the tree, and they need to be picked.
Yeah.
And I think what my whole family remembers are his ladders, which were not leaning against anything, but they had ropes down this way to support him.
Yeah.
And you could climb these things, and they didn't fall over.
Oh, they did.
I never did. But I don't think I could.
They just waited for me.
They did. Maybe they rigged it that way. And Taylor, hearing your story about bow ties, maybe that's why my oldest son Dave loves to wear bow ties. I never heard that story. In fact, I never knew a lot of what until I read Wayne's obit of all the things he's accomplished in life. Oh, what else was I thinking of? There were so many things that he's been at some of my daughter's weddings. He taught not only the boys, but my girls too. So many things about outdoor living and about life. My husband went up fishing in Canada with him and with Jerry. And I think it's the only time he ever went fishing, but he loved being up there and again, learning from Wayne, bringing home cornmeal mush. I still have the board and the slicer that we need.
We all do.
Yeah.
I bet. So many things, but Wayne became a big part of our life. And I'm just glad to see all these other people who love him too.
Thank you. Next victim.
I knew Wayne initially as an employee. And I think what impressed me was, I was looking for a job. I was working at Atlas Chalmers at the time as an engineer, and I submitted my resume because I heard about this windmill place across from the Elegant Farmer. And he called when I was gone, and my husband took the call, and I guess he introduced himself as, "Hi, I'm Wayne Hunnicutt. I'm the chief engineer at Windworks," but that's not saying much because there are just 2 engineers here. But I thought I had blown the interview at one point, and I'm talking to the president, Hans, and I did not know this, but Wayne was right outside the door. And Hans asked me, "Well, what kind of salary would you like?" I thought, oh, let's just go for laughs here. I know I'm not getting this job. So I said, I'd like about $500,000 a year. When Wayne picked when Hans picked his jaw up off the floor, Wayne sort of steps in and says, "What kind of salary would you expect?" But he said that when he heard me say that, he's like, "Yeah, we have to hire her." Shortly after I started at Windworks, and I started early summer, Wayne and another guy, their draftsman, also named Wayne, decided we should go to the Vernon Marsh and pick
I got a feeling my name's gonna come up soon.
What's that?
My name's gonna come up soon.
Yeah. And so during lunch hour, the 3 of us go to the Vernon Marsh and pick wild asparagus. And we got back to work at about 2. We're supposed to be back at 1. And the secretary tells me, "Your husband called. He is not sounding happy." So I called him, and he's like, "Where have you been?" I said, "Oh, you're in the Vernon Marsh picking asparagus." "You need this job. What are you doing? What's your boss gonna say?" He drove and he bought us ice cream on the way back. So yeah, he was a great boss. One of the words that I've not heard, I would call him unflappable, maybe because I was an employee, not a family member. But later on, when my daughter and son were born, they were sort of like the grandchild starter kit for Wayne and Ellen. So, but yeah, my parents were 400 miles away. My husband's parents were 300 miles away. So it was nice to have people that were acting as grandparents right there. And I could go on, but I don't want to show Carter.
I have to speak for my seat.
Oh, we can.
I haven't heard anybody say anything about the neighbors.
Oh, we're saving the best for last.
No, my husband worked during the day, and we were raising sheep and we were making hay, and the hay was down and needed to be baled, and I was out there with our old equipment and trying to get it done before the rain started, and the baler broke. So Wayne is right next to us, so you go over to Wayne, of course, if you have a problem, right? He's always working over, at least then he was, and I said, I can't, the machine's not working, so he came out, and he looked at it and said, "Oh," and he takes a piece off and says, "I'll fix this for you." He goes and he has that huge thing in the basement, that big grinding machine or whatever. What do you call it?
Yeah, the lathe and the milling machine.
Yeah, well, this was the milling machine, because it was a metal thing. So he just ground one out, put it in, and it worked just fine. He could do anything, yes, yeah. Yeah. What a wonderful neighbor.
Better at that than explaining poetry and things. You could do it. It does my heart good to see so many friends that we're good, dear friends of the family, and that if you don't want to get up and talk, that's not going to save you. I'm still going to point you out.
I remember that bow tie. Yeah, that bow tie was pretty significant.
The bow tie originated as working with machinery. It seemed too dangerous to have a long tie. But I think he just liked the eccentricity of it. You know, that was his look. That and his buzz cut. And I'm going to point at Hans, who was referenced in Edith's story. Hans ran Windworks, and our family owes him a debt of gratitude. My memory of coming to the farm when you were just getting started there, he had these hippies living in his outbuildings. So I think we called it a commune. I call them hippies because they had Birkenstock sandals and hair down to here. They also had degrees from Berkeley and I think PhDs and masters in engineering. So here's Dad looking like he stepped out of the cast of All the Right Stuff. He looks like one of the guys sitting at the computer in NASA. Short polyester shirt, bow tie, buzz cut, pocket protector, of course. And he's standing in a barn that's outfitted with a Franklin stove next to two guys in more relaxed clothing, and just talk about engineering. And that was meaningful to me, that he could get past seeing all this stuff that might have been a little different than his lifestyle. And I think he was just eccentric enough to fit right in that group. And Hans is the one that connected him to Buckminster Fuller. And the story behind that was that Bucky had a concept for a catamaran version of rowing eagles. And so he described his idea, and Dad designed it from the ground up, fabricated the molds to fabricate the hulls. And when I was 13, we're in the garage working with polyester resin catalyzed with methyl ethyl ketone peroxide. And we used these glass bubbles that were microscopic called the micromix, clouds of this stuff. Hurry up, because it's going to set. So we had not a respiratory protection in place anymore. So, but he made it to 97, so maybe there's hope for him. Hans, do you want to say it? I knew I could talk.
Well, this has been such a nice gathering so far, so if I can be a little sacrilegious.
Please.
All right. So one of my later in life assignments was to go with Wayne to Hunnicutt, which was very much, my benefit. And so he and I went up on numerous occasions. I can't even remember how many. And the typical routine was to go to Crane Lake, jump on a seaplane, fly into Nim Lake, which is on the north side of Hunnicutt, and then canoe from Nim, which is outside the park, into the park. Well, I think it might have been the first year we did this, maybe the second year, but as soon as you portage into the park proper, there's sort of a long channel, and then it opens up into a beautiful lake, and there are a couple of islands, and the islands have campsites, and so it was sort of late in the day, so this first island, let's camp here. So it's maybe 75 to 100 yards in diameter, and beautiful campsite. We set up everything, have dinner, fish. Wayne's thing was, you fish to eat, and so 3 meals a day. And so we caught the fish, we had the dinner. And then it's like, well, we're on an island, so we don't really have to hang our packs wet bear out here. And so we went to bed. About 3-4 hours later, there is the sound of saliva. And I have to tell you, this is the worst sound that I've ever heard in my life. And it's a bear. And it's accompanied by the ripping of dry eggs. And this bear is in our dry eggs. They had half the eggs already, half of the cook, the oil for cooking our fish. It was just ripping into this. I hear this whip off my pocket knife, jump out of the tent, screaming. Wayne, his tent's a little further from the campsite, yelling at the bear. The bear takes off in the direction of Wayne's tent. Wayne, here's commotion, jumps out of his tent in his skivvies and his headlamp, and he makes this sound that I've never heard any human being make before or since. The bear, terrified of this, runs past him. The bear's got one of our smaller dry bags in its mouth. Wayne sees this. Wayne was never like athletic, like you didn't see him on a soccer field like that. Wayne takes after this bear at high speed, and he's gaining on the bear. Finally, the bear realizes he's in a lot of trouble. The bear stops, drops the bag. Wayne boots it in the butt, and the bear disappears. Wayne, get back in your tent. I really had no idea how to handle this. So it actually gets a little worse. We go back to camp, and we clean it up. It's just a mess. And so we're cleaning this up. We're trying to salvage what we could of the food, salvage the bags. And then finally it's like, okay, well, that bear's not coming back. And so we're fine. Back into the tents. Well, about 2 hours later, we hear we hung the bags up. So 2 hours later, we hear this twang, the rope breaks, bags come down, and there's the bear eating out of the bags again. So we again jump out of our tents, scare the bear away, realize that this isn't, this really isn't gonna work. And so we better kick this bear off the island. So now we got 2 aeronautical engineers on a 75-yard diameter island in the dark. Wayne, I think he's coming your way. Now, Hans, he's coming your way. He did that for like 45 minutes. And the bear kept showing up one place or another. Finally, we realized this isn't gonna work. And let's head back to camp. Well, guess where the bear is? Back in camp. Eating. So anyway, we clean everything up and then realize that aeronautical engineers aren't gonna beat a bear in the woods. And so we get in the canoe, it's 4 in the morning, it's pitch black, and we paddle out.
He kept that secret for a long time. I don't think anybody in the troop would have been told by Dad to kick bears. Anybody else? Please.
My name is Mike Good. I grew up for a while in Big Bend, Wisconsin. From probably, age 2 or 3 when we moved out there from the city, yeah, and up until age 10, and then my folks, we moved out farther in the country between East Troy and Whitewater. But for those years, my mom got to know Ellen, and they were best friends. And they were working at the public library in the park in Big Bend together, and I met Carter. I think I've known Carter since I was 4 years old. So there's a lot of history here. And because we were in the same grade, we were the same age, and I think we were born within a week of each other, July 4th, July 11th, we were doing stuff together. And he'd come to our house, we'd go out, run around out in the land that we owned, and my younger brother Brian and I would go to Carter's house, and we'd go mostly play Army and do all sorts of stuff. Carter always had to be the RAF Spitfire pilot who bailed out, okay? And we were just the basic guy. Because he had, even back then, he had all the accents, it was all the theatrical stuff that you've ever seen, okay? Okay. And it was always an interesting contrast for me, because, and when you guys were talking about the nickname that you had for your dad, I'm like, that's perfect. It's perfect. Because he was such the dry sense of humor, very logical guy, very detail-oriented, which I'm accused of. But he was so different from my father. And it was just interesting for me as a kid to kind of observe this other adult, okay, and how he was. And he was always doing cool stuff too. Okay, I'm gonna out myself, so I became a mechanical engineer, bachelor's, master's, was a Navy guy, career Navy guy, did shipbuilding and ship systems engineering, and part of it's his fault. My dad studied civil engineering and was in construction and stuff, and that was cool, but going over to the Hunnicutts and go to the basement. Go to the basement. Wayne's workshop. The coolest stuff. And it's no joke. He could pretty much make anything. And I have, when I saw your write-up the other day, I have vivid memories of the geodesic dome model that he made, and I was like, what is that? And he explains this whole thing, and there's this guy, his name is Buckminster Fuller, and I'm like, okay, cool. You know, this is really different. I'm like, it's like a shell. It's not like a conventional house. And then you guys doing the project that you just described in the garage of like these racing skulls. And I'm like, I've never seen anything like that. And he's explaining to me how he welded the metal frame for the oarlocks and all this stuff. And he's figured out all of the mechanics so that they're more efficient and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, wow, that is so cool. So he was really an inspiration for me in a number of ways, with not only kind of like basic engineering, but like the hands-on thing. And that is also something that I got from my father, because my father was very much a hands-on kind of guy, practical applications. And it's something that I've carried through and really served me very well in the rest of my career, because there's one thing about, the theory, but then you can actually do stuff, you can make stuff. And he's the first guy that I always thought that was a cool thing to be like, your job is, you're an inventor. And he always struck me that way. I mean, I remember he made this crazy thing in the back of a semi-trailer that like had this rotating cage thing for, and all this, for animals or something, transporting them, or I don't know. It was, and he's troubleshooting it, and he's having little problems, and we'd be over at the house, we'd just like watch it, and he's like fixing it and figuring it out. And it was just, frankly, kind of an inspiration for me to become an engineer and, do the hands-on stuff and figure it out. He really, we moved, my older brother Pat was in Troop 26 in Scouts, and at age 10 we moved out of town, out into the country, and I ended up in a different Boy Scout troop, Troop 92, and I would always think of like, and we had average scoutmasters and scout leaders. And I would always like, wow, Troop 26, they build the pioneering towers and they do the rope bridges and all. Our scoutmaster doesn't do that, And so he just brought so much, his talents and really enriched the lives of the young guys, the young boys who were in his scout troop. I was kind of envious a lot of times, I have a lot of great memories of time out at the Hunnicutt's home. I never knew it was called Fairlawn. Okay. It was just this cool old cobblestone house that was like, over 100 years old, and it was just a unique place and a fun place, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have been, part of that and gotten to know your family so well, and gotten to know your dad. He really made his mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, your troop weren't losers. Would anyone else like to say anything?
I guess part of you, Carter, did you talk about him testifying in court on court cases?
I mentioned this in the obituary. He had a background with the Blackhawk tools. Along with the Porta Tower, he helped design this thing called the Korak system, which is like a stop sign shape of steel bars that you cemented into the floor of the bay, and then parked the car on top of it. It gave you places to push and pull from with all the tools. And he traveled internationally to promote this and so forth. But, where were we going with this? Oh. Because of his background with automotive repair, and I mean, I think some of it was pretty down and dirty. I remember stories of them like just aiming two cars at each other and letting them go and then fixing them. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it happened, but for a number of years, all the cars we had were wrecks that he had fixed up. In fact, we had one with a couple teeth rattling around in the force and chips in the steering wheel. And he was always the guy who wanted you to wear your seatbelt. We had those little stickers in our car before anyone even knew what a seatbelt was. So anyway, because of that background, he was tapped to testify in court as a forensic expert witness on crashes. The nice thing about my dad is he did know a lot about this, and what he didn't know, he could make up. And he had a, one case in particular, I remember I went out and did this, surveyed the site with him. It, like a three-way intersection out near Berlin, and a motorcycle had crashed. And he was complaining because the officer that did the measurements only used one point of reference, a telephone pole or something, and then measured, okay, the motorcycle was 50 feet away, the car was 70 feet away, but he didn't say in what direction. So, my dad was asked, I believe it was in that case, could this accident have occurred the way the reporting officer said? And my dad says, yes. Big pregnant pause. If the motorcycle were 50 feet long. And he was a big enough of a smart aleck that I think they liked it for that, because that went over pretty good with juries. So that's kind of the highlight of many stories he had about that. He would tell you the story about they were debating about how come it was dry underneath this car. And that had something to do with the timing of when it was there, because it was raining. And the attorney wasn't asking him the right question for him to answer this, so he writes down the answer on a slip of paper. When he gets up, he slides it over to the judge. His theory was that the heat from the car had evaporated the, I believe it was something like that. He might have been wrong on that one, but I just see him pushing a Post-it note.
I remember one of his stories about investigating an explosion in a car. It was some kind of typo. But he determined that it was the highlighter pens in the glove compartment that had overheated and exploded. It wasn't something wrong with the car. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like my dad.
Yes.
So, we've hit about an hour and 10 minutes. So if anyone else would like to speak, we still have plenty of time. Otherwise, we have a book over here if you want to sign in. There's obituaries if you'd like a copy. And we have some refreshments. The lemon poppy seed cake is to die for. A college friend of Savannah's has opened a bakery called Poppy. I have to push her a little bit here. Locally owned and operated bakery and coffee shop. 2 blocks away from here, right on that Ivanhoe Court that they formed right off of. And she's just a wonderful, hardworking, really talented baker. So try that and then stop in and get yourself a cup of coffee and a cookie or something. Everything's good.